Hi, welcome to Third Space Live, a show that offers conversations, stories, and ideas around mental wellness. I'm Jody Pihl, and today is July 30th, 2020, and this is episode 28. What if I told you that there's a tool that measures your unique strengths, and that by using these strengths, you can, and anybody can, be 3 times more likely to feel like you have an excellent quality of life, 6 times as likely to do what you do best every day, and 6 times more likely to be engaged in your job. Sounds too good to be true, and it sounds kind of like an infomercial, but I can assure you it's not. This is real. And our guests, Ed and Ron, today are going to tell us more about this. But first, I'm going to remind you that you can learn more about Third Space Life Charity and our programs and services and everything we do at thirdspacecanada.org. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch all of our shows, including this one, on our YouTube channel. So, before I introduce the guests, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the topic today. The Clifton Strengths Assessment Tool, or Strength Finders is what we're referring to today, is described as a way to measure your strengths or your talent DNA. The science behind the test uncovers your unique talents or what you're wired to do naturally. The test or the assessment tool gives you 34 strengths, lists them in the order of how those apply to you. And basically, these are your talents or your naturally occurring patterns of thought, feeling, or behavior that are innate to you, your natural abilities, in other words. And by using this tool, you can become more engaged in work, more productive in the roles you serve in your life, and you can be happier and healthier. So who's going to join us today to talk about this? It's Ron Schlitt from the Stronger Group and our own Ed Weiss from Third Space Charity. Ron has worked in corporate leadership for leadership development for the past 20 years. His expertise is providing strength-based leadership coaching and personal development to organizations at all levels. He's worked with almost every demographic of the working population in developing and leading individuals to successful corporate life. Ron's experiences are in human resources development, design, and implementation of programs, as well as consulting to governments, nonprofits, public and international corporations, and he also does some teaching. I've known Ron for many years. He's an amazing, dynamic guy, and he's really working in his talent area or strength area in doing what he does. So we'll hear from him in a moment. Ed, for those of you who watch the show, you've been introduced to him before. He's holds his master's degree in counseling as well as a master's in theology. He's a clinical counselor and intern supervisor here at the Third Space Life Charity with our student care program. And he's a great guy, and he's a fun guy to work with. Ron and Ed work together, exercising or utilizing the strengths tool. So without further ado, I'm going to invite them to join us. Hi, Ed and Ron.
Hey, Jody.
Hi, Jody.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You guys are so fun. This is going to be a fun show. So I can't wait to get going. I'm going to start by asking you both. Maybe we can start with Ron. How did you learn about strengths, and why are you passionate about it? What got you hooked on this?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for inviting me, Jody, to this. It's always fun. It's the best day ever for me when I get a chance to sort of talk about strengths and the philosophy behind it. And what makes it even better is working with Ed. We tend to have a lot of fun together when we can co-facilitate. So not saying that any of us are going to pull out any zingers or anything like that, but thanks again for the invitation. So how did I get involved in strengths? I was one of those kids that was brought up in a family that sort of predestined what I was going to do the rest of my life. And somehow I just didn't fit into that mold. And I kept trying, and the harder I tried, the more I would fail. And I remember working in the family business, and one of the main guys who wasn't a family member kept sort of keeping his eye out, and he pulled me over one day and he said, "You know what, son, lumber's not for you." And I kind of wasn't sure what that meant. But then he sort of unpacked it a little bit more, and he says, "You know what?" He says, "Lumber's not for you. You need to really work with individuals." And that sort of prompted me on the journey. And I would say it was a friend of mine, David Fung, once said that it felt like I had a chiropractor for the soul at that moment. Just kind of put stuff in line to feel right. It just felt right what his words were. And so I journeyed through trying to figure out what that meant to work with people and those types of things. And I ended up sort of accidentally bumping into one of the developers of the Strengths Finder with Donald Clifton, a guy by the name of Marcus Buckingham. And he introduced me to this whole sort of scientific tool around discovering what talents that I had. And when I took the instrumentation, it absolutely aligned with everything I believed inside of me, but I just didn't have a language for it. And it provided me that language. And that was my journey that just introduced me to the point where I got so excited about it. I went and got certified and did some training around it. And today I'm here getting a chance to talk to you and Ed. How about you, Ed?
Ron is actually the guy that introduced me to strengths. I was 47, and I thought I'd done a pretty good job of figuring out who I am. But that was a lifetime of work, you know, of deciding what you are and what you're not. And one of the beautiful things that the Strengths Finders gives to you, gives you the ability to celebrate who you are without tripping over who you're not. So I did the strengths, and, you know, for much of my life, I wanted to be important. I wanted to be somebody that was a boss, a CEO, a leader, and all that. And the strengths confirmed that I'm not wired to do any of those things. I have four relator and one influencer strength. So like my wiring is 100% for people. And when I saw the results and Ron explained to me kind of what that all meant, it is like I woke up to the fact that I can totally lean into the things that I am, and I let go of a bunch of things that I just realized I wasn't wired for anyway. So that was like, I was hooked the second I first experienced strengths, because it gave me language, like Ron said, for things that I've discovered about myself, but really didn't have words for it.
I can share my story. I didn't expect to be prompted to do that, but I met Ron with years ago while I was sitting on a board of a charity in town, and I had the same experience. It was like mind-blowing that all these thoughts and feelings and ideas that I had inside, but they weren't fully formed. I didn't have perfect clarity on them. The tool allowed me to be like, yes, I know this deep down that this is what I'm good at or wired to do. And it didn't necessarily align with how I was living at the time. And then consequently, I also got to see how that organization made use of it. Not only the assessment piece, but the entire team used it regularly in their work environment. And I saw how effective it was in terms of the organization having the right people doing the right things and everybody being happier. So then I ended up getting my husband and my kids to do it. And it's had a totally different impact on me that way. And you understand your family members better and why they behave the way they are and how to go about managing life with them, knowing where they're coming from. And yeah, it's an amazing tool. We're talking this thing up, but it truly is. And it's a huge part of figuring out who you are and what your purpose is. So maybe that gets me really excited about the possibility of, imagine if every young person was able to use this tool and find these things out about themselves young. Mm-hmm. I mean, you probably had experiences watching that happen. Maybe that's a good place to start. You could talk a little bit more about that, or do you want to jump into the science of it, Ron?
You know what, I think just sort of unpacking some of the experiences I've seen, and I'll bring it down to a pretty personal note. And if you don't mind me just telling a little bit of a story.
Sure.
Application, but I used to travel a fair bit, and when I would travel and I had young kids, I would come home from a business trip on a Friday afternoon, and I would be pretty exhausted, even though I had an enjoyable trip and got to do the things that I do best. I was physically pretty tired. So I would go and lay on the couch and I'd fall asleep. And my daughter, who was about 4 years of age, would be, daddy's on the couch and she'd want to take care of me. And I'd wake up and I would actually physically have Band-Aids on me. And she sit with her little Fisher-Price black medical case or whatever else. And, she was that way with the neighbor kids. She was that way with her brother. She was just this kind of caregiving, wonderful little kid. But, it's funny, you grow up and everybody's got a perfect will for your life. And, teachers would tell her that she should do this and that, she should do that. And certainly parents fall into that quite easily. Grandparents, we all want the best for our kids, but we see things in our kids and in other people, and we sort of say, you know what, you should do this because that's what you're really good at. You should do that the rest of your life.
Someone once told me that they call that shoulding all over yourself.
Yeah. You
and I love that.
Yeah, and with a last name like Schlitt, I can should a lot. So.
Okay, you got me there. Yeah.
And I am pretty guilty of shoulding all over the place. Those types of things. And especially, I think we all would love to do some sort of test or instrumentation that, if you answer this way, it should give you this aha moment to say, oh, you should be an accountant, you should be a lawyer, you should be, because you fit that mold.
They literally had that at the guidance office in my high school with this old-fashioned computer.
Yeah, I won't say what the name of the program is, but what was quite ironic about that program, because I studied it a fair bit at one point, was regardless of if you ever said you liked people on any of the questions, it actually came up that everybody should be a funeral director.
Oh my gosh, that was my number one, funeral director.
There you go. So I think we're talking about
That's hilarious.
So moving forward with my daughter, she when she became a teenager, she took courses that she thought she should because of that kind of fit in line with everything. And, she hated school because it wasn't in her strength area. She took a lot of sciences, which she couldn't stand, which she barely squeaked through. Math wasn't her thing, but everybody's saying, hey, to get into college and university, you need to do all these things. So she floundered about with a lot of, I would say, doubt about what she has and what her value is and her abilities and her skills. And she would try stuff, and you know what? She was good at some stuff, but there was no passion involved in that. And it comes to a little bit about the definition of a strength is, if I ask most people, what's the definition of strength? Most people will say it's something you're good at. And although that's probably somewhat true, it's probably not a complete definition, because if it was complete, then I'd have to ask you, Jody, when you were a lawyer, and I know you've changed careers recently, if the definition of a strength is something you're good at, is there anything in that previous career that you were really good at, but actually sucked the life out of you, that you didn't even enjoy doing, but you were good at it?
Of course. Yeah. Absolutely.
So would it be fair for me to look at you, watch you as perhaps your employer, and say, well, Jody's really good at that. She really does it well. And say, okay, so that's the rest of your job. You need to do that the rest of your life. So it's not really a complete definition, because I think all of us could say there's something we're good at, but we really don't even enjoy doing it. So maybe the more complete definition, and this comes from Marcus Buckingham's material, which is a strength is an activity. So it has to be a verb, an activity that actually makes you feel stronger, which means you enjoy doing it. When you enjoy doing it, you do it more often. And the more often you do it, the better you get at it. The better you get at it, the more you tend to want to do more and more of it, which then tells us this is how you actually start showing up to the world.
This speaks to me, just to capture that again, an activity that makes you feel stronger.
Yeah.
I think that one of the measuring sticks I've noticed in life is that things that make me feel exhausted or self-doubt or not good about myself, so the opposite of that, is when I'm forcing myself to do something I can, but it's not a strength.
That's right. So if the definition of a strength is something that makes you feel stronger, then you'd have to look at a weakness as something that actually makes you feel weaker. Doesn't mean that you do it badly. It's just it makes you feel weaker. It actually drains you and exhausts you.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about a physical draining. You know, I can talk and do a workshop and be mentally exhausted because you're presenting and doing all those types of things. I might be sort of a little bit maybe physically tired, but I love doing it and I look forward to the next time I do it. The real trigger point that we have to, I think, pay attention to, and what I try to get people to determine is when you are emotionally, psychologically exhausted, you're not in your strength area. So when we see burnout in organizations, we see burnout in students, most of the time they are like psychologically exhausted. It's not mentally tired because schooling is that. They're just not in, you know, sort of leaning into the things that make them feel stronger, which comes back to your point, which is we can concentrate on the things that we do poorly or that exhaust us, but we just try harder and harder and harder, hoping to get a better result and eventually get good at it. Truth is, yeah, maybe you can get better at it, but you're not going to be living your fullest life.
I remember the impact of that idea the first time I heard you say it all those years ago. And the irony of the traditional education system, for example, is that what you do is you find a kid's areas of weakness and you focus on that and try to make them better at those things, which is totally the opposite of what you're getting at here. And what the goal really should be is finding out what they're good at and helping them soar with what they're good at, instead of wasting time and energy on something that they're never going to be great at and probably doesn't make them feel good.
Yeah. So let me wind that back to completing the story of my daughter.
Yeah.
So she went through all these years. She graduated and she was going to take a gap year, which turned out to be a 3-year gap year. Because really, I mean, at that age, you know, she could have chosen to follow what everybody told her to do, which was not going to work well. Mm-hmm. And she finally landed on a course that required sciences and maths, but she was passionate about the idea. And, you know, most people would say, using that story, oh, she probably went in to be a doctor or a nurse or something like that. And really what she ended up doing was she went into the community college here and got a certification as a therapy assistant. So what do therapy assistants do?
I don't know.
They put Band-Aids and wraps on.
Oh.
So if you actually look back over the course of her life, everything that she was passionate about started when I saw it when she was about 3 years of age. And what's ironic about it is when she found that passion, she was able to knock out the sciences and the maths and get rather great marks simply because it made sense to what she was doing. She ended up being one of the top in the class. And I remember on her first practicum, within 3 days of the practicum, the organization was saying, when you're graduated, we want to hire you. It was that's how she showed up. So it was an activity that made her feel stronger, which actually aligned with not only her potential passions, but her purpose. So let me sort of unpack that real quickly, and then I'm going to let Ed speak on it. People always talk about, you know, living to your fullest potential. Well, what is potential? So for me, potential really means what are the things you can do? And there's lots of things you can do. Some you can do well, some not so well. Some you enjoy doing, some you don't, but you've got potential. Right? Passion is finding it within that potential. What are the things that bring life to you? In other words, what make you feel stronger? And then people say, but what's my purpose? Well, to me, purpose is now that you know what makes you come alive, purpose is finding out how do I use that to bring life to others? That's your purpose. So potential is what can you do? Passions, I would say, are what are the things that bring you life? And then your purposes, how do you find and align that to bringing life to others, which I think is kind of what Ed's doing really well. And I'm going to let him just tell his story of how he uses strengths.
That's a beautiful framework, though. Very helpful.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, thank you.
Richard Rohr, he talks about 2 dances that we do in life. He said the first dance is a survival dance, and that's basically understanding who you are, figuring out exactly that, what makes you feel alive, what makes you, what, just understanding the container. And then he said, many people never fully get to the end of that dance before they die. But if you're fortunate enough to actually get a really good handle on who you are, on what makes you beautiful, on what areas of your life, like I said, not tripping over where you are broken. If you can get that dance done, he said, then you step into what he calls the sacred dance. And you get to move around quite freely in yourself, quite freely in your personality, quite freely in your beauty. And that's, I would have to say that Strength Finders, and again, I was 47, and when I saw that there were 5 things that I do at a near genius level naturally, all of a sudden I had some tangibles that I could actually identify in my life, which helped me move around more freely in those areas of talent, genius, giftedness, whatever they are, whatever word we want to use to talk about them. And then in the Strength Finders, there's 4 themes. And that was very helpful for me. So you have 34 talents, but you have 4 themes. And some people are just wired to achieve, just wired to get work done. That's one of the themes. One of the themes is a thinking theme, and people spend enormous amounts of time in their heads. Another theme is an influencing theme. And the 4th theme is the relator theme. And when I saw that my whole 5 top strengths were wrapped up in relator theme, that made so much sense to me, because I do my best work with people. And on the other, and then one of mine was also an influencer, which is very much a people-focused theme. And I'll say this, like, I work with young people. I've worked with young people my whole life. My whole adult life, I've either focused with high school students, and then in the last 14 years, I've been working with university students. Think about how much better you are as a human being when you know who you are, because you don't freak out when you about the things that you can't do. You basically learn to move around in the things that you're very good at, and you position yourself, whether it's at work or in your vocation, to lean into your strengths, to work in your strengths. And much of the work that we do in adolescence, through that adolescent to self-actualization, is figuring out who we are. And if somebody would have given me 5 things that I'm naturally lean towards, good at, in my 20s or even in my 30s, it would have saved me a whole lot of time, trying to be what I'm not, right? And so whenever university students, for instance, in Canada, students change their major more times than not in their 3rd year. And that's got nothing to do with, that's got more to do with understanding who they are, coming to awareness of who they are, than it is about, I don't like this, I don't like my major, so I'm going to change my major. I'm more wired this way. And if you can give them a leg up in those first few years of their university and say, consider this, the instrumentation is identifying these 5 things, and then giving you a full page descriptor on each of those 5 things, that's invaluable.
Your comments remind me of a conversation you and I recently had about how so many people feel like imposters for part of their life or all of their life, maybe because they're not living their life within their strengths. You're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and you don't feel like you belong. You never feel like you're really in the right spot or doing the right thing or living the right life. And I think your comment about young people, students, for example, it's so easy to be influenced, more so maybe than ever with social media, but they tend to look outward to find out what they're supposed to be or should be, that whole thing. And this tool allows them to go inside and go, wait a sec, I should be looking in here at who I am as a unique person to figure out who I am and what I need to be doing, not trying to fit in a box, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's gotta be, I think it's probably one of the most empowering things that you can experience as an adult, is truly knowing who you are and finding a way to live authentically in that. And if you're a two-trick pony, you're a two-trick pony. Find a way to live your life in those two tricks, right? But
and be okay to let go of the rest and feel okay with that. Yeah.
If I can just add to that, you made a good point there, Jody, about it allows you to look inside. The beauty, I think, of something like this is when you come to that point where you're aware, first of all, and you have that awareness, and then you move to that piece of accepting that's who you are. As Ed said, when he accepted, these are the 5 things, and it makes sense. You come to this point of appreciation, and you appreciate who you are, but more importantly, you actually land up looking inside of others differently. Because you look at them and you say, they are wired different than me, and they bring great value to what I can't do, which is the beauty of a team environment. Like, you know, that old saying, get the people on the right seats in the bus, or however that thing is. That's really what it's about. So anybody who may be listening saying, well, isn't that a little bit being a little bit selfish? Is, you know, it's all about you. The most unselfish thing anybody can do is to find out who they are, because then they can free everybody else to be who they are, instead of trying to you should do this, you should do that. And it allows for individuals to be not only the best of who they are, but to let everybody else be the best, because it takes away that whole, I have to be good at everything, I have to be well-rounded. Well, nobody can be well-rounded. You know, that lie that we've been telling kids, you can be anything you want to be, is a complete lie, because you can't, but you can be a whole lot more of who you already are. So find out who that is, get a language around it, and then lean into that.
Yeah, it's been powerful as a parent too, to understand where your kids' strengths lies, so that you can also help them through tough times when they have self-doubt or they're beating themselves up. That's when all the stories we tell ourselves starts, right? Ed, you can speak to that in a moment. But instead of hating on themselves and feeling like they're less than or failures in certain areas, instead of having that conversation on, well, wait a sec, you know, those things maybe aren't as important. Let's focus on what you're wired to do.
We had the opportunity to do this with a number of police officers in town. And these are officers that work together all the time. And at first they were a little reluctant. They're busy. They don't need to. And then we went through all of their strengths with them individually. And then we got together and when we got together and began to unpack who each person was, when we went back the second or third time, they're all chirping at each other, identifying strengths. Well, that's your woo going off over there, and you know, that's that, and they began to speak to each other and understand each other through the lens of the strengths. It was cool.
Yeah, that is cool to watch. I had that experience at the nonprofit I was talking about earlier, and they actually, it's great practice. They posted the strengths on in the front of your office or your door or by your desk. So it's everybody's, oh yeah, this is how I have to approach that person, or I'm not going to ask this person to have this role in this project. And yeah, it's great that way. Go ahead, Ron. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of make that point around when you start to identify those other characteristics of people, it just, that freedom that comes with it, because, you know, I now can ask for the umbrella of grace, I call it, which is I get asked to do something which is totally makes me feel weaker. And I'll say, you know what? I'm not sure I'm the guy. I'm not the guy that you want for details and be analytical. But they say, yeah, but you're the only one. And then I can go, okay, if I'm the only one, then guess what? I'm going to need you guys to give me a bit of patience. It's going to take me a lot longer. I might actually even be a bit grumpier in the next day or two having to do this. I'll probably make some mistakes, but are you okay with that? Now I can freely say, that's not my strength area. I'm not saying I won't do it. I'm just giving them that understanding, which really, when I go into organizations, corporations, I'm actually telling them I'm going to have them learn how to have conversation around a new linguistic. I'm giving them a linguistics course, which is I'm giving you a language. And it isn't, you know, some Star Trekian kind of thing they can't understand. But, you know, when Ed talked about woo, you know, at first people go like, what the heck is woo? Well, that's a cluster of talents that come together, and it stands for winning others over. And so anybody that's ever met Ed, the first thing he's doing is trying to figure out, so how am I going to win you over to be one of my new friends? And he does that very, very,
very good at that.
Very good at that, right? And however he uses it, whether it's humor or through extroversion or introversion or those types of things, that's really unique, right? So the chances of you meeting anybody with the same top 5 out of those 34 is 1 in, you know, if it's an identical order, is 1 in 33.6 million. So technically you're 1 in Canada. So if you've ever sat in a room and went, am I the only one that's thinking like this? Yeah, probably. Right? It's measuring your decision-making processes and your motivations, which makes us completely unique individuals.
So just for the benefit of the person who's never done this test before, maybe we should just spend a minute or two talking about what this assessment tool looks like, how it works, because we haven't even talked about that yet. It's probably, yeah.
You want me to start with this?
Sure.
Yeah. So basically it's an online instrumentation. People often call it a test, and it isn't a test, because a test is a question that you can get right or wrong and then you get marked on it. An instrumentation is measuring something. So really they're measuring intensity based on some pretty simplistic comment or what's
intuitive responses.
Yeah,
really.
Intuitive responses to a statement. So they would go online, they would purchase the instrumentation. I think it's about $27 Canadian, which is fairly inexpensive these days for instrumentations. They would register with Gallup, Gallup being an international company that does the psychometric. And it prompts you through to the point where you start to take this instrumentation, where you need 30 minutes approximately of uninterrupted time, because each question is timed. You have 20 seconds max to answer each question. And it sounds like a lot, but
you kind of answer with your gut.
Yeah. So
you answer from down here more than, you know, spending a ton of time.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. This would be an actual question that would be on this instrumentation. So I'm asking this to you, Jody. On one end of the scale, I like to read all instructions before starting. On the other side is I jump into things right away. Where on that would you click?
Depends if I'm being marked on it or not. In my personal life, it'd be jump in. If I'm wearing a professional hat, I've learned to be duly diligent. So I don't know. That's it.
So most of the time, where would you find yourself? That you
Naturally, I would jump in.
Okay, so that would be click. Okay, that was about 10 seconds of your time right there. And you kind of argued with yourself a little bit on that one. A lot of the questions are very, very clear to an individual. So you click on that. There's 177 of those types of what we call pairings, and you will click on where you are intensity wise. And when it's all completed, it spits out what we call your top 5 of the 34 cognitive thinking patterns. And, you know, so for myself, I've got 5 words that I know are very accurate about me. Number 1, I'm very strategic. I have maximizer, I have relator, I have what's called ideation, and then activator. Those 5 are clusters of talents, and the report that spits out tells you what each of those is and all the talents inside of that. So even though it sounds a little bit like a label, once you get into it deeper, you can start to talk more in you know, actualities. As an example, I don't ever walk in and say, oh, by the way, I'm the strategic guy, so come talk to me, because I know everybody's got a different definition of what strategic is. But I am the guy that will say, hey, I'm the guy that likes to find options and available things. When we hit roadblocks, I'm going to find a way around it. So come to me when you need somebody to help you navigate around a roadblock, something that you're stuck with. And not only that, it pairs with my ideation, because I'm going to probably come up with some pretty creative off-the-wall ideas that you've never thought of. And then as my relator, I'm probably going to spend some time with you individually. So it all sort of collates itself together on that. Ed, do you know what your top 5 are?
And how empowering is what you just said? So when you don't know who you are or how you're wired or any of these things about yourself, you can't be as confident. So the fact that you know those things and you're strong in those things, what an amazing thing that is.
I'll take it a step farther, which is, it allows me to look for those opportunities in organizations and actually put my hand up and say, hey, that's what is stronger. I want to do that, as opposed to wishing that my employer would find that and see that in me and offer it to me, because I'm not sure how to explain it to them if I don't know who I am. And then all these great opportunities bypass, and I just sit in my little office going, geez, I would have really liked to do that, but I guess I just haven't proven myself, or maybe I can't do it. So that is an empowering thing. When they talk about, empowerment, you have to be aware of who you are.
Well, you really give your power away if you don't know who you are and what you're strong at and what makes you happy, and you're trying to find someone else to tell you what that is. You're giving your power away.
Well, and we've gone through life like that, haven't we? You know what? When we were younger, who did we look for affirmation of what we were good at? Our teachers and our parents, right? And not anything against parenting, but I know the teachers filled out report cards. I'm not beating up teachers, but when we brought our report cards home, what did we do with it? We showed it to our parents, and normally, our parents said, oh, you got an A here, well done. But you know what? You really need to concentrate on the C- and the D here. And
you got A's?
Well, just recess and lunch.
Wow.
But, so we've always looked for others to affirm or validate who we are, right? And when we move into businesses, who do we look? We look to our HR person, we look for our employer, and we follow this thing called a performance evaluation review, which people can't stand doing, because most of the time we spend time saying, well, you're good at this, but we really need to concentrate on the things that you're not so good at. And nobody really enjoys that conversation. I'm not saying you ignore those things, but I am saying that when you can put up your hand and volunteer and say, hey, this is when you will see the best of me. Those opportunities, people start to look and go, oh yeah, you said that's what you enjoy doing. Okay, buddy, bring it up. Let's see it. In addition to the fact, what I love about it is it actually allows you, and Ed and I we've often talked about this, it actually now allows you not only to say, hey, this is when you'll see the best of me, but we'll also know this is when you'll see the worst of me. These are the things that are going to trigger off.
Right.
And you can have that conversation with employers or your spouses or your kids. You start to identify, oh, this is one of those times where I'm going to have to give more grace. Or, you know what? Maybe I do need to spend some more money on my employee on training that piece, never expecting them to be the star. But for right now, this is what we need to do. You want to?
What's interesting is my strengths are the very things that got me into trouble all the time I was in school. Communication is my number one. My number two is adaptability. Empathy is 3. Woo is 4. And connectedness is 5. Okay. And what's interesting is that I talk I was the most annoying student ever. And I would distract all the other students because I have communication and connectedness. So I'm connecting constantly. I'm talking incessantly. My woo means I'm winning everybody always badly when I was young. And so I was a teacher's nightmare, but and I think it's true many times when I'm doing these strengths with the 17, 18 or 19-year-old, they're the very things that are sabotaging their relationships, their friendships, because they're not being harnessed well. The older you get, the more you mature, the more you begin to lean into with maturity into the things that you are gifted at, or the areas of strength in your life. Then they get home to to become really powerful in your life.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that too. When you listen to Ed's story, people often say, well, can't a strength become a weakness? And absolutely. And they often say, well, how do you know when you're kind of going to that shadow side where your strengths are taking over? And I think the simplest way I can describe that is it's a strength. A strength becomes a weakness when it is completely self-focused. So looking at Ed's story saying he was the worst student, it was about him, right? It was, I got to communicate and I got to connect because I'm not really catching what the teacher's talking, but I'm going to win you guys over with humor and joking and laughing and talking. Is kind of probably pumping up his ego a little bit, and he's got friends. A strength is only a strength when it's others focused. when you're saying, this is what I've got, here's how I give it away, that's when it becomes a strength. As soon as it becomes so self-focused, it actually goes way overboard, becomes a weakness. So I'll give a quick example. If you have somebody that loves detail and needs to analyze absolutely everything, and they actually end up sabotaging a decision because they spend so much time getting information, is self-serving because they're not getting the confidence that they need. If they said, here's the data, here's the information, I've done my role, now you guys take it and make the decision what you need, now we've got it as a strength. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know that I've used this with my kids as well, in terms of the shadow strengths, and assuring them that these things, some of the things they're getting actually criticized for and disciplined for, maybe even in school, that once they mature and learn how to handle them, is actually what's making them unique and awesome, and going to allow them to contribute in a great way someday. So that's a great talk. I've seen that.
You know, if you have, like, for instance, I have woo, and if I'm really an insecure person, all of my woo is about me. Once I become a secure person and a mature person, which I'm hoping that will happen in the next few years, then all of a sudden my woo is not so much about winning you over to me, but it's winning you over because I think I have things in my life that I can help you with. It becomes you-centered. The gifts the strengths still are what they are, right? Your empathy isn't. So if I'm insecure, I'll turn it up. By the way, all of these strengths are on a dimmer switch. You can turn them up really loud and kind of be over empathetic, or you can turn them down. You still have the ability to do that, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, that's just maturity, and they become really powerful in your life.
Talk to me more. You touched upon it a few moments ago, Ron. We didn't flesh it out. Was that this tool also allows you to be more empathetic and compassionate to other people, because you realize that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, right? And maybe you're more attuned to that, or paying attention to it in a different way, or giving people more grace when they're in their areas of that aren't strengths.
Yeah, I'll give you sort of a modern day story to that, a personalized story. This COVID-19 pandemic has been the petri dish for me to observe strengths and to test it out. I can't go into a grocery store without watching the way people are reacting to new rules and regulations and go, oh, that's why they're doing what they're doing, or saying what they're doing is because they're wired this certain way. So there's a theme called consistency. And, you know, if I just threw that word out to the general public, they go, oh, that just means they consistently do the same thing over and over again. That's not technically Gallup's definition. Consistency in the world of Gallup is all about justice. It's about fairness. So the minute I look like I'm going to walk down the wrong aisle, the wrong way because the arrow, I'll have somebody say, hey, that's the wrong aisle. And then it's almost like they're the rule maker of ensuring that I'm following the rules because it's only fair for everybody else.
I love those people.
Yeah, well, I don't, because I have strategic, so I look for the most efficient way. So in shopping, that whole arrow thing has driven me absolutely crazy, because I just need to go there. Oh, you mean I have to go down the next aisle, then back up and around and on. So that to me shows how normally I would be really annoyed with people back in the earlier days, because I'm going, this is just stupid, this is dumb. Strategic is about sometimes breaking the rules, and I'm working with somebody who is all about rules. So it allows me now to look at people and go, you know what, that's the way they're wired, and actually they're right, because they're more about fairness than I am, and yeah, I am breaking the rules, so I better fall in line with them on it. So
you know what just occurred to me though, Ron?
Yeah.
You're making the point beautifully, but there's another point to be made, and that's you're actually understanding your own inner experience, and something that anger, for example, a lot of people struggle with that. You're being able to use this tool as a way to identify what's going on inside your body and making a better choice of how to respond to that uncomfortable feeling, instead of just being angry or telling somebody off or just feeling rotten inside. You're like, wait a sec, I know how to process this because I know what this is. No. That's pretty cool too.
There is that piece for sure, and there's the other piece. So my wife has got empathy in her top 5.
Mm-hmm. And so do I.
and I don't have it in my top 5. It's somewhere in there, sort of in the middle. And there's often times where she will point out before we'll go to a social event or whatever, saying, hey, I think such and such is going through this or that or what. And she picks it up. Like, it's amazing how she picks that up. I would have never picked that up. I would have walked in and said something really stupid, not knowingly, but just made it awkward. The fact that I can lean into her empathy, and I will often do that, say, hey, is there anything I need to know so I don't stick my foot in my mouth? She'll tell me, and then I can navigate through that. But it's
sounds like a husband whisperer. She should be on the show.
Well, yeah, she has this very easy touch where she just sort of squeezes my leg, and I go, oh, I need to shut up now.
My wife just says, shut up.
Yeah, but you got communication glue, so she has to.
That's right.
Yeah, but that just basically, I hope, gets the point of the fact that it just allows you to look at other individuals and see what their strengths are, but then to realize that that isn't mine, whether it's, certain things will trigger me to get angry or something like that, or annoyed or frustrated. I can stop and look at it and go, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. Right. It isn't that big of a deal.
Marcy, my wife, and I, she works at the airport. And as a manager, she would sometimes, I'd pick her up at 9 o'clock at night after her shift, right? Often I would be sitting there till 10 o'clock and then she walks out. And because I'm all relater, I'm feeling a little snubbed. I'm feeling like, doesn't she care? Like I'm not being respected and all of that. And she'd get in and not even blink, not even bat an eye. And now I'm pissed off, right? Now I'm mad. And one day I just said to her, it's interesting to me that you, if I'm late, you're all over me, and if you're late, it's no big deal. And we could not come to terms on this issue. And then we did the strengths. And my wife has responsibility, achiever. She cannot leave until everything is set up for the morning manager. She can't leave, you know what? And so we came up with this great strategy. You know what? I said, call me 10 minutes. Call me when you're done. And while you're cleaning up your computer and getting other things, I'll be on my way. And it's just amazing how many areas of our lives we've tweaked, because I realized this isn't being annoying. She's not being rude. She's being who she is. And that just goes off in your head. By the way, I always thought that, I was hoping when I took the instrumentation, when I used it, that my top strength would be entitlement. Because I am the guy in the store that will walk the wrong way on every aisle, and I am that guy. Like I must, I'll drive people crazy.
Yeah, that's a really good example of using the tool in your personal life. I've noticed that one of my top 5 is adaptability. So not only am I cool with change, I actually need change. I thrive off it. So part of this COVID emotional experience and roller coaster, I've had to really try hard to constantly connect with other people and listen to how it's impacting them and how they're feeling, knowing that not everybody is feeling as comfortable with the change as me. One of my children is the exact opposite. He needs total structure and predictability. So that was a really powerful tool for me to understand. There's so many things. I think people are really gaining a lot of awareness about themselves. There's a lot of talk of people being introverted or extroverted or this and that post-COVID. That's cool that everybody's paying attention to themselves, and good time to try Strength Finders and dig into that a little bit more. But yeah, I've used it as a way in the workplace during the COVID situation to understand why some people are coping better than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what, you've used a word a few times, which I'm just going to point out to the viewers. You said it's a tool, and I think that's really important to realize. It is a tool. It isn't, going to solve the world issue for you. It's not going to necessarily make you happy, although it might. But it is a tool combined with other tools. When I look at strengths and I kind of do a marriage between the love languages, you can see some correlation in there. You're looking for those common patterns. When you look at certain communication styles and patterns, it all sort of fits into that piece. And I'd love, just for, I don't know how much time we've got left, but for Ed, just to have a quick little chat with you about how he uses the tool primarily for the university students and some of the youth, because I did have the opportunity to work with a really large organization down in the States. They had about 56,000 employees, and we were working with the top individuals of that organization. And at the end of the 2-day session, they always did the same thing. They'd come up and they'd say, "Thank you very much. I've never taken time to figure out who I am." And these are, in their 40s and 50s. But then they followed it up with this, which is, how do I get this into the hands of my children or my university kids so that they don't have to wait 30 or 40 years? And Ed's kind of on the cusp of doing that with individuals, which I get fascinated by. So can you just speak into how you use that as a tool, Ed?
Absolutely. So post-secondary education for so many is something that was chosen for them. There's an assumption in certain families that you will go to university, right? Young people today they're self-actuating. When I use that term, I'm talking about they are starting to understand who they are and what they want to move towards in their lives vocationally, and who they are and what kind of person they want to be with. That's happening around the age of 27, 28. Okay. My generation, we were, that was happening at 20, 21. Okay. And so they're lost in this extended adolescent journey without a whole lot of things to be able to define themselves with, except for their grades. Okay. And that's really not that's an external that you talked about before, Jody. You know what? And so when we invite students to participate in some strength stuff, I've found that usually around 21, they are itching to know who they are. Because by the time they've been in university for a few years, and they're just doing it because that's what they're supposed to do. And now they're starting to take ownership of, what makes me different, what makes me amazing, what gives me joy, that kind of thing. And you see that.
To jump in there for a second, you've also told me that the flip side of that is a lot of distress. There's a lot of anxiety and stress and other things caused by that because they feel like they should know that and they don't know that, and it terrifies them.
And right, and I don't know what's wrong. I'm gonna, high school counselors are still doing what they did when I was in high school. They're telling them they should know.
They should be funeral directors.
They're really setting these kids up for failure. They're setting them up for stress. When teachers in high school are telling kids they should know what they're going to be when they grow up, well, they should not know. Not when they're 18, not when they're 19. They're figuring it out. And I've often told you that, there's a lot of material saying that 21 is the new 14. And so in some ways, developmentally, they're functioning, at the age of 14 with some of their abilities to understand who they are and how to make big decisions. And so it creates enormous amount of stress. Mental illness is off the charts in post-secondary. And that's why we and the team that we have, we're swamped from the day in September when school starts until they go home in April. There's just not enough time to deal with all of the stress. Because think about this, if I'm supposed to know who I am and I don't know who I am, then how in the world am I supposed to know what major to take? And so you live with this constant knot in your stomach, and the body can't, it was never designed to function that way. And so things give way. And kids get depressed, and they have panic attacks, and they live with enormous amounts of anxiety.
So tell me how you make use of this tool in those types of environments with students, for example.
It's not a life changer, but it is you give a student an opportunity to go, okay, I guess this helps me define a little bit of what I like and what I'm good at. And you're just giving some, just some handholds to be able to figure out who they are. So it is just an instrument. It's a tool, like you and Ron have been using that term, to help them go, okay, I'm starting to form an understanding of who I am, and these are just some places I can build on.
Yeah, if I can equate it, I use sort of 5 letter A's to sort of describe what Ed's talking about. Is I think society's taught us to start at the very top of the 5th A, which is what am I supposed to do? Just tell me what I'm supposed to do. What's this perfect thing that I'm supposed to do the rest of my life?
And kids these days, part of that delayed adolescent journey is the fact that they have had they've had a roadmap in front of them the entire time, their entire lives.
Yeah, and some of us parents are guilty of trying to navigate that for them on those kinds of things. But I think we really need to start at the very bottom of the S, if I put the A's on there, which is the first one is awareness. We have to be aware, find out who we are, which then leads us to, once we know that, is okay, can I accept that about myself? And nobody can walk me through that. Nobody can tell me that I have to accept it. I may say that's, yeah, we agree with what you're self-aware of, but I have to personally accept it. And then I have to move to the level of the A, which is appreciation, is when I can appreciate that and say, okay, there are some great places. Then and only then do we start to look at application. So where can I actually apply this? What roles can I do in life? So for my daughter, back to that story where we all started with this, with the Band-Aid stuff, is, it wasn't starting there. It was starting at the bottom to understand that, where she actually says, okay, so where can I apply this? Because I can't, and she can't stand blood. She can't stand seeing people in like pain that's going to lead to death. She wants to see where it can be remedial and where it can actually get fixed. Now she applies it and goes, oh, physiotherapy. Oh, occupational therapy. Oh, I don't want to be that person, but I sure want to help that person who can help somebody. That's that application, which then finally leads you to the final A, which is where we always start and is wrong, is alignment. We need to have all of that other A's in place before we can move to alignment. And I always talk with organizations saying, hey, when you put out a job ad, really what you're doing is you're going straight to alignment. What's the best person for that job based on their resume and a quick interview, and okay, and then they find out it doesn't work. Man, if they would have started at the bottom and says, well, let's get some awareness. Let's find out who they are and what they can do. So I think that's kind of what the struggle of these kids is there's so much pressure on, you got to figure out the A at the top of that S, which is alignment. Oh no, we need to start down here, which I think is what you guys do, right? You kind of get them to get aware and to appreciate and to.
Could you imagine, Jody, the challenge of an international student who is kind of dealing with all of that and then coming to a culture that is foreign and having to perform optimally, and just because this is an enormous investment, on their family, right? From their family. So just to your viewers, this fall, together with David Brown, a colleague of mine, and we will have 8 interns who Ron is going to train them to facilitate the Strength Finders instrumentation. We will be doing these throughout the school year for students, just so that, because it does help significantly when somebody who's trained with this material to actually go over it with you, because it helps interpret it.
That was one of the last questions I wanted to ask you guys to give a little bit more detail about. Is this something someone can do alone, or do they need to work with a trained facilitator to really understand what this says about them and how to use it in their life?
Yeah, I mean, certainly nobody can do the instrumentation for anybody else. They'll have to do that themselves. The report is pretty revealing. I kind of get a couple of responses. One is, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I knew that all along. I just didn't have the verbiage for it. There's a few where people are a little bit surprised because they had a different interpretation of the word. So that's helpful to have somebody who knows the material a little bit more in depth, just to help them understand a little bit more, which would get us to that sort of acceptance and appreciation, just saying, do you see how that fits out? Couples are particularly fun to do this with, simply because one of the couples says, you mean you spent money on that? I could have told you all about that, right? So it's how we show up to the world. So,
hey, you know what? That's a totally different show that we should do.
oh, there you go. But in light of your question, I don't think it's necessary, but it sure is very, very helpful, because we get stuck in that rut of, okay, if that's good about me, then I still want to work on my weaknesses, because we're so ingrained in that remedial society. To have somebody to walk you through and say, no, let's not worry about that. You're thinking the wrong way. Let's look at it from this point of view.
Yeah, you have to be brave to trust in that.
Yeah, and so the guidance that Ed and his team provide is simply, it's questioning and listening and just helping them discover. I mean, it really is discovery. And sometimes it's a lot better to have a guide to point things out. If you go to Europe and you see a nice place, you can do it. But isn't it better when you have a local that just kind of points stuff out that you just didn't quite see or you bypassed?
Perfect example, or those headsets you rent at the museum that walk you through all the pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I really encourage people to have a session with Ed and his team, or whatever around that. That's my own personal opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, I agree with that. You can do it alone, but to have a subjective person, a subjective interpretation of what this means, it helps you see things that you're not always sliding back into your old bias.
So I'm mindful of time here. I'll just remind the viewers that Ed and his team in the student care program with Third Space Life Charity have their services available for any post-secondary student in Kelowna now, including UBCO and the college, starting September, which is super exciting. This is one of the many supportive care services that you can expect to find through Ed and his team in Third Space this fall. I'd love to talk to you more, Ron, about application of this in the couples environment, family environment, or some of the great work you do with for-profits and not-for-profit businesses, but we've run out of time, so maybe we'll have you back. Thanks, guys, for coming. Is there any last-minute points before I sign off?
I'm good here, Jody.
Yeah. I mean, I heard one wise person once tell me this. He said, you know what? We weren't created to die with potential. We were created to die potent. And, potential is something you can do. Figure out what your potency is. And once you figure that out, you're going to live your fullest life. So those are my only words that I stole from somebody I can't remember. So
doesn't get better than that. That's so great. Thanks, Ron.
And thanks for inviting me and letting me have a conversation and to hang with this guy. It's always a treat.
And I look forward to, Ron, the three of us having more conversations about how we get this tool to more young people in our community, because I know we're all passionate about doing that. So everybody can stay tuned for that. Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Joe.
Great. Thanks everybody for joining us. Just a reminder, you can learn more about everything we do at thirdSpaceCanada.org. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Watch this show and all our other shows on our YouTube channel. And a special reminder that we have an art event fundraiser coming up September 3rd. You can learn more on our website. It's called 19 Connected Through Art 6 Feet Apart. Hope you will join us at the event and the bidding to support all the great work we do. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Ron and Ed. See you all soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.